Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's your girl Tisha, your midlife makeover maven. And I am with my sister, Miss Kimberly Hamby, today, coming to us with a word of prayer and encouragement and inspiration. Welcome to the Midlife Makeover Movement Thrive Thursday. This, my loves, we have a treat today. Miss Kimberly has a special lesson for us. And Miss Kimberly, take it away, darling.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am excited today, as always, to be able to greet you and to share what the Lord put on my heart. So, last week we were talking about anger. And so, as I continue on talking about things that affect us daily in our life, I wanted to bring out a topic that is important and is necessary to discuss because many people are not equipped with the tools to be able to set boundaries in their life. How do I set boundaries? You ask yourself, how do I set boundaries? But more importantly, how do I set godly boundaries? And how does that work? How do I process what boundaries I'm going to set, how I'm going to set them, and I will also talk today about how to forgive and unforgiveness in this topic as well. And so, what does Proverbs 4:23 say about boundaries? The 12, Proverbs 20 excuse me, Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. And when you guard your heart, a guard is a boundary, a definitive line or limit that we may put or keep out sin, distraction, and us unnecessary brokenness. When I did the study on this, there are a lot of times where we have unnecessary brokenness because we didn't know how to set a boundary. We didn't know how to say, you know what, this is coming into my comfort zone and I'm uncomfortable with it and I need to set a boundary here. Setting a boundary is a form of self-care. It helps to create a clear guideline, rule, or limit of how you would like to be treated. They let others know what is and what is not okay and acceptable. It honors our needs and wants so that we feel respected and safe. Many times we haven't felt respected or safe. We haven't felt like we could talk about what we're feeling, or we can even say what we're feeling and be comfortable to say it and confident to say it. How do I actually set a boundary? You might ask yourself. The key is to start small. Focus on one thing at a time. You know, this is a new process for some people that will hear this. This is a new way of thinking for some people that may hear this. So you take it one step at a time. Be clear, focus on what you want as clear as possible. Practice. If thinking about setting a boundary makes you nervous, write it out, what you want to say beforehand, or practice stating a boundary in the mirror. Keep it simple. Less is more in boundary setting. So keep it simple. What happens when you start setting boundaries? You take better care of yourself. You're not feeling beaten down. You're not operating in places of guilt and resentment because I did something that somebody wanted me to do that I wasn't comfortable with. So what happens is you start feeling better. You're in a place of self-care. Boundaries help you prioritize your own well-being. Plain and simple. It is not selfish to take care of yourself and your needs while also considering the needs of others. I'm going to say that again. It's not selfish to take care of your needs while respecting and considering other needs. So some unhealthy boundaries examples are disrespecting the values, the beliefs, and opinions of others when you do not agree with them, not saying no or not accepting when others say no, feeling like you are responsible for other people's feelings and happiness. I don't. Sometimes you wish you could have the responsive feedback of people saying "Amen" or "Can you relate to this?" So I'm hoping that the people that are hearing this, can relate to what I'm saying. Sometimes typical boundaries that you need to set are being able to say no and being okay with no, I'm not available. No, I can't do this today. There's another day that might work best for me because today is not the day. There are three types of boundaries. Typically, they fall in categories: emotional, which means protecting your own emotional well-being; physical, protecting your physical space; sexual, protecting your needs or safety sexually. Those three things are very important. When I grew up, my dad would talk about don't allow people in your personal zone. And so as you've gotten older, you realize what your personal zone is. People can be in your personal zone and you feel uncomfortable. So you have to set a boundary and, put your hand, I'm not comfortable with you being here. And today I'm going to talk about just general relationship boundary setting. But next week, I want to talk about personal relationship in dating and relationships in marriage, because I think it's two separate things and they're two separate ideas and ideals when you're talking about setting boundaries. So let's talk about boundaries from the perspective of forgiveness. When you're setting boundaries with an individual, it doesn't mean if they've done you harm or you don't forgive them. When we set boundaries, it's self-care. However, when you've been disrespected or harmed, there should be a healthy discussion regarding your feelings. Once you share them, setting that boundary may be necessary. There are a lot of times where some people are able to hear you when you're setting this boundary or you're trying to have this healthy discussion. Remember, one of the things I said before was that you have to write it down. If you're going to set a boundary, maybe write that boundary down. You may have to erase it if you're in a computer, on your phone or on the computer. This boundary that I'm going to set, I don't want to hurt someone else when I set this boundary, but I want to be respectful to both parties, myself and the other person. Forgiveness is an action undertaken to stop an injurious process. Forgiveness has nothing to do with who was right or who was wrong. It has everything to do with how you choose to move through life and for the rest of your life. Many times, as we talked about last week, anger and resentment can turn to bitterness. And so when you start operating and dealing in places of unforgiveness, then that thing can affect your entire life. It can affect your job, your relationships. It can affect your family. It can take a toll on you so bad that you're not healthy enough to function, and you become normal in your dysfunction, and you think that this is normal for me. I'm not going to deal with this because this is what I'm dealing with, but it's not healthy to deal with it from the standpoint of being unforgiving. So we have to deal with unforgiveness. These boundaries typically fall into the categories that I talked about, but I'm also going to add workplace boundaries, protecting our ability to do our work without interference or drama. You may go to work sometime and folks don't like you because you're doing well. Folks just get mad at the sight of you. I know many times, even in church, there might need to be some boundaries, because people, when you up doing the work of the Lord and folks get mad because God is elevating you in your workspace, God is elevating you, and people get jealous, they get angry, they don't know how to handle their emotions. And so what happens is you feel disrespected because you haven't first set some boundaries for yourself. I'm not going to let these people hurt me. I'm not going to let this person looking at me strange be something that's going to cause me to come out of my character. And so I've added workplace boundaries, protecting our ability to do our work without interference or drama. Praise the Lord. What are examples of physical boundaries? Physical boundaries are, I'm really tired, I need to go sit down. I am not a big hugger. I am a handshake person. I know somebody who don't like proximity, being close to people. They're not a hugger. They're more of how you doing? I'm gonna throw my hand out and shake your hand. I need to eat. I'm going to go grab something. I'm allergic to such and such. So we can't have that in our home. Or plain and simple, no. Don't go into my room without asking first. That's a parental boundary. Don't you dare go in my room and be in my stuff without asking first. Don't go in my cabinet eating my food without asking first. Those are boundaries. So you see, as I'm talking, some of these boundaries are normal boundaries. Some of these are relational boundaries that you need to set so that people will respect you and respect your opinions and how you operate. So the first point I had today is communication. Point one is communication. Communicate your needs and be honest with how you want to be treated in any situation. So a lot of times you know, we shy away from having this conversation and saying, this is what I need, this is what I don't like. And in growth, in maturity, communicating is probably the best way to be able to stop offense or root off people getting offended by you saying no and just point blank stomp down no. It's a way of being able to share honestly and openly what it is that you need and don't want and what makes you uncomfortable. So this is number 2 is a big one. Seek to be more emotionally intelligent in how you speak or express your thoughts. I'm going to go a little bit deeper here because emotional intelligence, even if you're 50 years old, you may not have it. You may not have people. A lot of times people do not operate in an emotional, intelligent way. And so emotional intelligence has to do with empathy. It has to do with being a sound listener and listening. So the 5 ways to communicate, I'll go there. Emotional intelligence is listen and reflect before responding. So this is part B of number 2 with seek to be more emotionally intelligent. So the next one is acknowledge and affirm. Yes, I hear what you're saying. Let me process what you're saying better so that I can respond better. Use your empathy skills. Don't take things personally. So emotional intelligence, when you're operating in that way, you don't take things personal because sometimes it's not even about you. It's not even about what Kimberly is hearing, or maybe in that space, there was something that triggered you that made you think, oh, you're talking about me. You're doing this to me. You're hurting me. So don't take things personally. And the next one is evaluate the situation. That's number 3. Evaluate the situation. If you're in a situation and you know you need to set a boundary, the more mature you become in setting boundaries for yourself, you will know how to evaluate the situation, meaning sometimes I got to step back. Sometimes I got to process what you're saying. Sometimes I got to hear you and maybe agree to disagree or say, you know what, give me a few minutes. I'll respond when I can. That was that emotional intelligence, being able to know when it's time to listen and reflect versus listen and respond. Number 4, consider the other person's emotional pain and how you both got here. You may be a reactive person, meaning you're a fixer, you're a helper. You're to the point that you may begin to carry that emotional baggage that the other person has basically brought you into their bubble and their dysfunction. So you may be a person where you're reactive. So I want to help you. I want to go there. And then you find yourself, your life is good and you're so bogged down with someone else's issues that you're not able to help them anymore because you've taken on their pain. And so as I talked about this, being a fixer and a helper, you also have to set boundaries for yourself. Don't be a non-reactive. You be a non-reactive listener or friend or support person or coach or whatever you may call it, what have you, mom, dad. You may need to not be so reactive, but non-reactive so that you don't carry this baggage, because the number 4 was consider the other person's emotional pain and how you both got there. You may be a reactive person. So being reactive, it causes anger. It causes resentment. You might fly off the handle. You may be like, I'm sick and tired of always hearing you going through the same thing. Well, that's because you're naturally a fixer and a helper. You want to make things right. You want to help somebody. So you lack the patience to be able to support this person. Once again, setting a boundary is saying, you know what, I may not be the right person to help you with this one. Let me refer you to this person. Let me give you, let me contact somebody else. Or you may have a friend group and that other person may not be so reactive to things. And they may be a higher emotionally intelligent person, so they can handle stuff a little bit better. Number 5, acknowledge how angry you are and begin to mentally and emotionally deal with it. Take some time away, processing what you're feeling by identifying, labeling, and accepting your feelings. So if you're getting ready to set some boundaries, but you're feeling like it's time to set some boundaries with this particular situation. Identify, label, and accept your feelings first, because we're dealing with us. This is all to help you, to keep you from getting to a place of unforgiveness with people. And so one of the things that I said earlier, and I said it quickly, is you may have to evaluate if it's time to get off the roller coaster with this person. You may have to evaluate, I gotta go. I can't do this anymore with you. I'm not able. And so that's where God leads you. You have to allow God to lead you, because the scripture I gave earlier said in Proverbs 4:23, it said, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. So we have to be emotionally intelligent enough to know that this is going to take me to a place that I don't want to be, that my mind will be unhealthy, that I won't be free, that I won't be able to do things that I want to do, the people that are in my life that are good to me, I can't be good to them because I'm dealing in the cycles of pain that I didn't set boundaries, and I allowed myself to go there. I allowed myself to be stuck. I allowed myself to continue to live in dysfunction. And so as I close, the last one is forgive, but begin to do the hard work. So the hard work is what I said: identifying, labeling, accepting, acknowledge and affirm, listen and reflect before responding. Don't take things personal. Also, I talked about communicating what it is that you're feeling. You got to be able to communicate. And then know that this is about the other. This is not about the other person. This is about you. You want to make it into heaven one day. You don't want to carry baggage of unforgiveness and anger, and it turned to a root of bitterness. So all of this I'm saying is that your desire has to be, I need a free mind. I need my heart free. I need my soul free. So when I get my soul free, then I know how to set boundaries. I know how to communicate what it is that I need out of this relationship and what I don't need. What makes me uncomfortable? What do I need to say to this person in a healthy conversation to discuss what it is? We can't go. We cannot go to this place anymore. We can't say this anymore. I feel disrespected. And so when you feel disrespected, it's also a time for you to use the tools that I talked about today. And that emotional intelligence will be able to allow you to speak or express your thoughts in a way where you're hearing the other person, but you're very clear about where you're going in the next phase of that relationship. And so I hope that today was fulfilling to someone. I could have talked more and more about what it is we're talking about today is godly boundaries. Those boundaries that even the Lord said, you don't want to cause yourself to be in sin. You don't want to be distracted, and you don't want unnecessary brokenness. You can head that thing off before it start coming, because you know what? When you're in a place of not setting boundaries, there are a lot of times that you are all day long processing, all day long going through emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you're wounded, and that brokenness causes you to not be healthy minded. You know, it causes you to not function at your best. And so I pray that this was a blessing to you, and God bless you all. We'll turn it back over to Tisha.
Ooh, that was some good word. Some good word. I actually, there's a couple of things that you touched on, so you need to unmute so we can have a little discussion.
Okay.
So when you talked about the three types, the emotional, physical, and sexual boundaries, oftentimes, so we're just coming out of the holidays, right? And, you know, I had been having a discussion about going through the holidays, and everybody's holiday is not great, considering, right? And so I think one of the things that I have been good at is physical boundaries, meaning distance. However, not so great at emotional boundaries. And because of that, the word that you came back to with people in your head, it's rumination, right? So you're having these ruminating thoughts where you're not physically in somebody's presence, but they're still stuck in your head, right? And so it's difficult sometimes when you realize, especially in workplaces can be toxic. This is not good for my mental health, but I need to have a job. It can be with family members. I love the fact that you said you can forgive people, but also still choose, like, you understand that you're not good for my mental health. So I'm choosing to distance myself from the relationship. And so oftentimes we find in families, but you my sister, or you my cousin, or you my child, where it is, I can do whatever I want to do because of this role that you have in our lives. And sometimes we
Yes.
taught, I can't speak for other communities, but sometimes we were taught in the African American communities, you don't get to have no boundaries. You get to be
Yeah.
ruled by everything that's going on in the family. And if you're the most functioning ones, we see this with siblings, right?
Mhm.
Well, you don't have nothing going on, so you should be responsible for taking care of mama. Or you don't have this going on, so you should be responsible for handling this financially. Or
Yeah.
I can't deal with this person, so it's going to be your responsibility. So we do a lot of, you don't get to have a boundary if you're going to be
Hmm.
part of this family. And so
Hmm.
there's a lot of us that are just kind of just stuck out there. Like,
Oh yeah.
for me, just it was new in the past couple of years, right? So I didn't even really know that. How do you maintain relationships with people and trying to set boundaries in environments that won't honor your boundary without, feeling like, that environment is just not healthy for me. Like, how do you process through that?
Well, remember I say you have to respect the other party. You have to be able to communicate it, but you have to have the emotional intelligence, meaning maybe write it down. You know, in the past, I've seen people write letters. Write a letter. This is what I'm feeling, because the truth of the matter is people don't like to hear truths. And so
Mhm.
if there's no truth being spoken, there's no healing that's going to take place. People have to hear the truth in order to be able to be healed. And so that communication is also a healing place, but you have to know when it's time to say it and when it's not time to say it. You have to know who you're dealing with. And then if you're not dealing with somebody that will receive it, then you also have to say, you know what? My mother always say, brush the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. And she probably laughing right now, but it's the truth. Sometimes you have to dust your feet off, because the truth of the matter is everybody is not ready for your boundaries. Everybody is not respectful of who you are and your time and your season that you may be in. Their season may be a season where there's a need, and you have to decipher, is this something that I'm willing to put myself into before I go into it? Because if I'm going into it, I need to go into it wholeheartedly, knowing that it's going to be bumps and bruises on that road. It's going to be times where I'm not going to like what's being said. I'm not going to like the people that's doing it to me or I'm involved with. But guess what? I had a friend. She had a dad. She loved her dad to death, loved him. And so he was dying. And she quit her job and moved back home and took care of her father. Well, 5 years earlier, she had a mother who was going through the same thing, dying. And her mother and her didn't never get along. And it had to do with the sister was light skinned and she was brown skinned. So her mother had this toxic trauma that she caused between her daughters, where she favorited the light-skinned one and the brown-skinned one, but the brown-skinned one went off, didn't have any children, had got married, had a rich husband, all these things. And so the mother, then this other sister stayed home. So the mother kind of pit the sisters against each other. But guess what? When that mother was sick, she was the only one that was able to financially stop what she was doing, go take care of her mother and see it through. And so sometimes you got to know what you're dealing with when you go into these situations. And not only that, but don't wait till people get sick. And then you're forced to have to deal with them in their sickness, and you're begrudging because you haven't taken the time to deal with the trauma that caused you to stay away for so long. Does that make sense?
It
So
absolutely does. I think you hit on this too, is that forgiveness does not necessarily mean reconciliation, and it doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. And I think a lot of people believe that even though I've forgiven you, that means that you're entitled to be in a relationship with me. And that's
yeah.
true.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can kind of tell what's going on by the fruit, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
there's some things going on at the root, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see, people are kind of the same in environments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there is this thought, and I think for me, I was one of those that thought, if I had, there was a lot of unforgiveness in me because I felt like erroneously If I forgave, that required me to be back in relationship with someone who was harmful. And that's not true. That it is okay to forgive and still hold a boundary. And holding
Yeah.
the boundary does not mean that you have not forgiven. The other person might believe that. But
Hmm.
as long as you're clear that forgiveness does not necessarily mean reconciliation, you can forgive someone who's harmful to you, but
Hmm.
they're still harmful
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah. Because
And you just
they
have
haven't
to.
done the work. You've done the work, they haven't. So they're still in cycles of toxicity. And you're saying, you know what, I'm delivered from you, because we can be delivered from people. And so, I'll talk from personal experience. My dad was somebody that was toxic, and I saw it heading on. But I also know that he dealt with mental illness and post-traumatic stress disorder. So I separated myself from it because there was no good that was coming from him. There was no positive that was coming from him. And then my times of need, he was not there for me. And so, as an adult woman, I knew that this was something that I could not continue on desiring him to be the man that he wasn't. Does that make sense? And so it was
Absolutely.
causing me pain because he wasn't the man that I desired. He wasn't the TV dad. He wasn't the dad that my friends had that they could call on anytime. He'd be there at the drop of a hat. That wasn't my father, and that's not my testimony. But at the end of the day, when he was down sick, I went to his rescue, was there for him on his deathbed. And the reality of it is I had to forgive him because he was not only dealing with his own trauma, his own pain, some people are dealing with stuff that you don't know nothing about. And I didn't say this, but I'm deal with it next week. And I just want to bring this out. But people are who they are because of how they were raised. And if there was a home that was no love and no respect, mama and daddy was fighting and fussing and arguing. If there was a home where, my mother talked about this all the time, living in a godly life in front of your children. Now we could pause on that, because living a godly life don't always mean because you go to church every Sunday. But godly life means
Of course.
there's a godly, you're living what you're preaching about, because people can go to church and they could fake church. They can fake who they are in Christ, but the real person and the fruit of the fruit that they bear and how they treated you. And so love will show how a person really is treating you and how your experience with them will be. And so I want to talk about that next week, because truth of the matter is people are who they are because of their environment. And if they don't deal with their issues, another word my mother would say, isms and schisms,
Isms and schisms.
isms and schisms that they got going on, guess what? You're going to be out here bleeding on people with all your toxic behavior that you again have called normal. Oh, this is how I grew up. This is what I saw my mommy and daddy do. No, this is not how you treat other people. Because it was normal in your life doesn't mean that it's normal for everybody else. And people will find themselves with no friends, no relationships, no nothing, or losing jobs. All because they haven't dealt with them. And self-care is important for you, but it's also important for the person. And if they don't begin to self-care and self-heal and ask God to help them, sometimes you got to say, God, help me. Lord, I need help. I am not okay. I need help, God, because I can't do this on my own. I can't live this life like this, because it has caused me to fail. And you have to start saying, I have failed at this. And that's that. I may have failed as a mom. I may have failed as a daughter. I may have failed as a son. I may have failed as an employee. I may have failed as a friend. Sometimes we fail at things because we've done things that we didn't know in the beginning it was going to cause so much pain and hurt. And so I'm gonna stop, but I just this topic we can talk forever about this topic.
We're not going to talk forever. It was such a great lesson on boundaries. I think that boundaries are a new phenomenon in Black families, and it's just such a necessary conversation. And I appreciate the lesson. We're going to turn off the recording now so we can get into our prayer. Okay. Thank you so much for coming with the great word. Tell people how they can find you, please.
You can find me on relationshipequipment.com, or you can find me on Relationship Equipment on Facebook. Love to have you come and check out our pages, check out our website. We are endeavoring to help couples, singles, and engaged couples build better relationships, equip them with the tools to be able to function in healthy relationships, not just a relationship, but a healthy relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, you can find us at the Midlife Makeover Movement Facebook page, and you can find me on Instagram, the Midlife Makeover Maven, and of course, the Midlife Makeover Movement YouTube page. Subscribe, like, comment. Weigh in. How are these boundaries been working for you and your family? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Have a great day, everybody.